When I was about 11 years old, I was wandering through my local Blockbuster in the video game rental section. Usually, I just picked up whatever licensed games looked vaguely familiar to me to try for a couple of days. But this time, I spotted a game I didn't recognize that had some really cool artwork and cute-looking characters on the box. I was curious enough to pick it up and see what it was about. That game was Sonic Adventure 2 Battle for the GameCube. And with this oh-so-innocent decision, a whole new world was opened up to me, a new franchise was about to be added to my list of obsessions, and I was about to be introduced to one of my favorite characters, Shadow the Hedgehog. Hello everybody, I'm Kate Cass, welcome to our edition of Let's Talk About. Today, okay, I ruined it in the intro, we're talking about Shadow the Hedgehog. If you've ever talked to me for more than 10 minutes, you probably know I'm a big Sonic the Hedgehog fan, and of Shadow in particular. A fact that certainly got me a lot of social media notifications in 2024, a year that has been dubbed the Year of Shadow, with the release of Sonic X Shadow Generations, the upcoming Sonic the Hedgehog 3 movie, and a campaign to celebrate everyone's favorite edgy hedgie in as many ways as humanly possible. Shadow fans are eating better than they ever have. So to commemorate the Year of Shadow, I wanted to take some time to talk about what Shadow the Hedgehog means to me, why he's my favorite Sonic character, and why I think he's important. As much as I've talked about Shadow, I've never really gone into my personal experiences with him. So, let's fix that. There's, of course, the obvious reason why Shadow is so special to me. His debut game was also my introduction to the Sonic franchise. Sonic Adventure 2 was my first Sonic game. It's the game I've played the most in the series by a fast-paced mile, and even though my first video game love was and always will be Pokemon, it's my favorite game of all time. And aside from the Blue Blur himself, of course, if there's any character that leaves a big impression in that game, it's Shadow. Sonic had rivals before, but no one quite leaves the first impression that Shadow does. Before even introducing himself, he shows himself as a darker version of our protagonist, displays a huge amount of exceeded and mysterious power, and the only thing we know about him is his name right before he leaves Sonic utterly baffled at what he just encountered. It's such an incredible reveal that holds up in spite of the god-awful audio mixing this game is infamous for.
Hey, it's not his speed. He must be using the Chaos Emerald to warp. Shadow.
Can you all not talk at once, please?
We can't understand.
Everyone jokes about how Shadow could have possibly been mistaken for Sonic and vice versa when they look so different, but it fits that they look similar enough and have the same type of abilities that Shadow is presented as almost a dark reflection of Sonic. Someone who can match him in strength and ability to give him a tougher adversary that he has to learn to combat and overcome. If Shadow was just a tough rival for Sonic, I think he still would have been a memorable character, because for a long while, that's all he was to me. For the first year or so I had this game, yes, I eventually convinced my parents to get me my own copy, I only played the hero story. I had no desire to play as the bad guys, and that's all I saw Shadow as, a bad guy. This jerk who keeps showing up to help Eggman with whatever he's planning and pick a fight with Sonic. Why would I want to race a mile in his rocket shoes?
They're air shoes.
But eventually, I exhausted the hero campaign for all I could and got morbidly curious, so I gave the dark story a try. After 3 levels of about what I expected to see, right before Shadow's first proper level starts, this happens.
Find them before they escape!
Shadow, I beg of you, please, do it for me. For all the people on that planet. Sayonara, Shadow the Hedgehog.
That went dark fast. I like this very much.
In hindsight, the way Sonic Adventure 2 presents Shadow is kind of brilliant. Most people, when they first played Sonic Adventure 2, likely played the hero story first. Not just because the dark story had 2 new unknown characters in its 3-character roster, but of course that in a Sonic game, you're gonna want to play as the main hero. So your first impression of this mysterious new character, who is only associated with the main bad guy, is through that lens. Shadow is seen as a rival and villain in the hero story because we don't learn anything about him. He is the mysterious, intimidating figure who's always in the way of the heroes, and nothing else. But in the dark story, in bits and pieces, the reason behind why Shadow is always in Sonic's way, why he's teamed up with Eggman, and what's really motivating him slowly but surely become clear. And all things considered, it's pretty messed up and tragic. I know that a villain having a tragic backstory that actually makes you empathize with them is a tried and true trope. Most great all-ages media made in the last 30 years has at least one. But something I think people often forget about overused archetypes, especially the ones that are good when done well, is the first time you saw it. The first time a certain story device or character type was exposed to us, and the impact it leaves. Alongside the likes of Ken and Koichi from the Digimon anime, Shadow was very much that for me. It kind of rocked my world that this guy I had seen as the bad guy for so long, had been through and lost so much, was able to be compassionate and outreaching when it really counted, and was deep down just hurt about this very awful, unfair thing that happened to him that had been warped and twisted into
Revenge!
Now, for the record, because we live in a world where you have to say this does not excuse or justify Shadow's desire to destroy the entire human race in retaliation. But I often say that trying to understand why a character thinks or acts a certain way is more valuable than just rushing in and serving punishment. And a lot of that attitude came from these things I slowly discovered about Shadow. This is gonna sound silly, I'm sure, but Sonic Adventure 2 was one of those stories that made me look at the world differently and demand more from the media I consumed. For its target demographic at least, it's complex and challenging. Realizing why these tragic actions took place and the role you as the player now have in making things better in the future. And Shadow's journey is a big part of that. However, it would be a while before I got the whole story of SA2 because I'm not great at video games, and no matter how many times I played the hero story, I just couldn't get past Crazy Gadget until years later when I could look up a YouTube playthrough. To get the full impact of Shadow's story, and most importantly, how it resolves, I really have Sonic X to thank. Most of you already know this, especially if you've watched my History of Shadow videos, but for its second season, Sonic X adapted Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 into 6-episode story arcs. I discovered Sonic X a couple of years after first playing SA2, so I was excited to not only see these events play out again, but in a way where I didn't have to know how to clear a level to do so. Win-win. Now, there are changes made to the story to accommodate for the established canon of the anime, the most significant moment of which, to me, is how Shadow's change of heart is depicted. After being silent but resolute in his goals, on the precipice of his revenge being attained, he's forced into a situation where he has to decide if his hatred and grief are going to stand up to the pleas and reasoning of an innocent bystander. If being hurt, abandoned, and used so long ago is worth doing the same thing now to others.
How can you blame people alive today for things that happened 50 years ago? Can't you see it's not fair?
Don't talk to me about fair! Not after what happened here!
There's a reason this is one of my favorite moments in the entire Sonic universe. Most of all because Chris is the one who does this. I know people don't like him, but in this case, no one was a better choice to do this than him, representing everything Shadow has ever loved and hated in this universe, placing Shadow face to face with another innocent child aboard the Ark, but this time with the choice of what this child's fate is going to be.
Deep down, you know you were made to help others, and that's the reason you finally rescued me.
The show isn't subtle about this parallel, at all, but that doesn't make it any less substantial and impactful. And despite how obvious the symbolism is, I'm shocked I don't hear more people talk about it. Maybe it's because they're more annoyed that the parts where Chris gets pummeled was cut out of the 4Kids dub, but if you ask me, everything that makes this moment great is perfectly intact. The fact that Shadow looked this human who he's gotten acquainted with in the face, shouted all of his grievances out at him, and in the end decided to not repeat history, but instead be as compassionate and kind as Maria always knew he could be, it's just so well done. Realizing that this Hedgehog, who I once saw as a carbon copy rival, would give up everything to protect a world that, in the grand scheme of things, he owes nothing to, was such an emotional realization to me, even if he got better later. It really stuck with me, and it's something that I truly hope the upcoming movie emulates. That's the thing about Shadow, though. More often than not, he forces the Sonic franchise to push its own boundaries and be more challenging, with questions of purpose, identity, responsibility, and self-worth. Shadow is constantly put in positions where beings want to manipulate him into using his ultimate power to serve their desires. But so much of Shadow's journey is figuring out what his desires are. They are motivated by Maria's wish, and always will be. But over time, he's forged his own path through building his own code and making meaningful connections.
If the world chooses to become my enemy, I will fight like I always have.
Sure, it can be heavy-handed or straight up ham-fisted at times. His solo game is a great example of that. But when they hit, Man, they knock it out of the park. Shadow represents the depth this series is capable of, and the rewards that can be reaped with the risk of being a bit more ambitious and a little more daring. His influence can be felt from future games, to comics, to other characters. Shadow's popularity that was so large they brought him back to life shows that there's a good amount of Sonic fans who want to see the team take these risks, because they leave a lasting impact. Maybe I'm giving it too much credit, but considering that's what happened to me, well, I guess I speak from experience. It made me so sad years later when I started engaging with communities online to see that many saw Shadow as a joke, an edgy caricature that was just a vessel for tired tropes that only the most try-too-hard adolescent could relate to. And if they did, they were only trying to be cool. Not because there was actually anything of substance to Shadow, that anyone who said he was their favorite character was hella cringe. To the point that, for a while, he became that. Shadow was pushed to the side with the rest of the ensemble cast as they only wanted to focus on the core four, and that's fine. If you don't think the more ambitious stories are working, scale back. But because Shadow is so popular, they kept bringing him back as this moody, selfish brute to antagonize our main team, basically canonizing that vision of him that his detractors claimed he was, to keep up this image of dark and uncaring, when the whole point is that Shadow cares so much that he's willing to take more extreme measures than Sonic can in the name of protection. And as someone who cares about Shadow a lot, that was depressing for a while. This is why the recent Shadow Renaissance is such a big deal. Someone somewhere figured out what made Shadow appealing in a lasting way, and now we're seeing it depicted much more in ways that are truly worth celebrating. Tagging along as a forceful ally, diving back into his backstory and how it still affects him in the present day, going back to his origins in a new medium for a whole new generation. I have never seen as much positive reception towards Shadow as I have in the last year. It's absolutely wonderful. When that trailer for Shadow Generations, where he got the Doom Wings, came out and everyone was collectively losing their minds at how cool it was, as they should, I saw someone compare the overall excitement to it now to if it had happened 10 years before, that instead it would have been seen as a cringy gimmick. And to this day, no one summed up the shift in perception towards Shadow much better than that. In and out of universe, Shadow's problem has always been surface level assumptions of him, seeing him as a threat, as a weapon, as a villain, as a cliche, as a poor attempt to make Sonic, but edgier. But take the time to look closer, like I did, and you'll see something much more meaningful. Someone who was made for a single purpose, yet loved for who he was as a living being, who has so much power but was powerless when it really mattered, striving every day to atone for that, thrust into a world that says it doesn't want him but needs him in their darkest hours. Someone who survives, not because of his ultimate power, but because giving in is not an option. Through sheer determination, Shadow the Hedgehog, the ultimate life form, has endured. When the Fearless campaign was launched commemorating the Year of Shadow, they put out a press release that included this motto that is meant to represent Shadow, and that those who aspire to be like him are asked to emulate. Break barriers, be unafraid, be at your best, and do it all with a powerful confidence. It kind of made me emotional to see an official Sega piece of marketing describe Shadow like that. Shadow represents fearlessness in the face of adversity, whether through outside forces or inner doubts. He's had his ups and downs, his good and bad stories. They still need to work on him in the IDW comics. We're not quite to the point of celebrating that one yet, but I'm sure we'll get there. But he always manages to push through. Shadow is my favorite Sonic character because there's just so much to discover under those red and black quills. He represents a lot about what I love about stories, what they can do, how they can make you feel, and how that sticks with you as the years go by. And it's kind of crazy to think how all that emotion hinged on picking up a GameCube game rental out of pure curiosity. Also, I mean, come on, look at him. He's so freaking cool. He can teleport, shoot arrows out of his hands, and turn his entire body into a bomb. That is cool! If Shadow continues to thrive as he has during his year-long celebration, I bet there'll be many more fans with similar stories about the ultimate life form in the generations to come.
I am Shadow the Hedgehog.
This is the destiny I choose.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Definitely let me know what you think of Shadow the Hedgehog in the comments below. That's why this series is called Let's Talk About. I want to give a very special thanks to my patrons who help support my content, including Jinx Productions and Wait in the Wings. If you'd like to join these fine people in supporting my content while getting cool exclusive perks, you can check my Patreon page at the link in the description, as well as my other social media if you'd like to check any of those. Thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you guys next time.